Welcome to CodeCreative. I'm Travis Tolson. Hopefully this thing's going well. And we're up, I hope. We'll find out soon enough, I suppose. So today I'm going to take a look at skeleton loading in Service Portal. So for those who are unaware, skeleton loading is that fancy little thing in, you see it in Facebook, social media sites when it initially loads. It'll pop up with kind of these placeholders. It can be very useful when you're loading side content. I wouldn't normally recommend this for the main content. But in service portals, if you're loading certain pages where you've got some, sidebar widgets, it can be useful to load those on the side. That way your main content displays faster and you can turn around and load that additional data on the side after the main content has loaded. So this is completely unscripted. I'm doing this ad hoc, so we're going to be exploring this one together. So to go ahead and get started, I want to create a scoped application. See, this is the great part about this is that you get to see just how much I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. Hopefully my edits in the other videos makes it look like I know what I'm doing some of the time, but most of the time I'm just kind of fumbling around hoping for the best. All right, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. So we'll call this one the skeleton loading widget. Actually, you know what? No, I don't like that. We'll just call it CodeCreative widgets. That way, if I do more of these in the future with Service Portal widgets, maybe I can just reuse the same app. We'll just continue in Studio so I don't have to fill out the other info. And I'll leave this one open because Studio has some cool little launchers for some of the Service Portal stuff. I've never really tried it from in here before. Widget, Service Portal. So we'll kind of give this a shot and see what happens. Okay, so this launches the Widget Editor. Now, normally I would go through the primary list view and go through the main interface just because, well, honestly, I don't adapt well to new things. So I've gotten used to using all the regular list views and such. But we'll try something new today. Do the create a new widget. Simplest skeleton load. And nah, we won't create a test page, at least not yet. We can create one later if we need it. And I see a loading icon, but I don't know what's actually happened here. Ah, there we go. All right, so to start up here, I'm going to enable preview. All right, so now we should get a good preview over here. And the first thing that I want to do code-wise is just kind of start setting up a basic scaffold over here. So class, panel, panel default, and this is just using the bootstrap panel. Okay, so I've got some lines there. Let's see. I want to say it's panel heading. And we'll save that, bump up our preview. Okay, we're slowly snapping some stuff together here. All right, so next up there's going to be basically two different views here. Ultimately, what we're going to have is the skeleton setup, which is just going to be the basic placeholders. And then once it's loaded, then we're going to display the actual content. So I think what we want, let's see, I'm going to have to go back to some Bootstrap 3 panel, because I can't quite remember offhand how to put together these panels. And I don't know how other people are with this. I mean, I imagine that there's some people that are just so daggone good that they don't even have to worry about silly things like documentation. They can just flip it from the hip and run with it. But for me, not so much. Here we go, list group. This is what I'm looking for. So this is what I want, is those nice clean dividers going between, you know, and using the Bootstrap code just helps simplify some things. So we're going to add this scaffolding in here, save it, and that should give us basic setup to start with. Okay. Now, as I said, we do want two of these. The first one is going to be our skeleton, and the second one is going to be the actual data. Okay, so I'm going to delete these off of here. This second one is going to be my actual data. I want to conditionally display these. So I'm going to create a scope variable here. And we'll call it, now that's actually bad. Let's call it isLoading. And we will default to true. That way it's going to show the skeleton initially. And then once loaded, we'll update isLoading to false, and that will set us up with the actual data. ng if c dot is loading. If not c dot is loading. And so basically what we've got here is we've just set it up so that these two different ULs will show conditionally depending on whether or not this flag is shown. So if it's true, you can see that I've got the 5 items from up top. If it is false, it should just show the 1. All right, there we go. This is actually working out better than I had hoped. Okay, so now that we've got the 2 panels showing, I'm going to go ahead and leave this secondary one. Basically because what I want to do is set up our server-side code to pass some data back. So I'm going to put this in a function. And we'll just call it, now, we'll call it getListItems. Hardest thing in programming is naming things. And cache invalidation, was it? I don't remember. It's something along those lines. Let's see. So getListItems. This is where the glide record comes in. And again, I'm sure a smarter person than me would have this on a macro where they like click a couple buttons and it happens. But no, I do it the long way every single time. And I know some guys like Stephen Bell would shoot me for the GR and tell me to name it something better. But I'm sticking to my guns. I'm going with the function name. So we'll query from incident. And gr dot, let's do a set limit. And we'll do 5 items. And so later on, we can go back and we can add instance options. We can add, we can make some more of this dynamic. But by putting the hard code in, I can quickly scaffold things up. Jar.add query. Let's just go with the actives for now. Actually, let's go add encoded query, because that's going to make it easier to adapt it to instance options later. And then gr.query. And while gr.next. Now we're in our glide record loop. And ultimately, I need an items array. And I know that there are a number of Service Portal APIs that'll let you quickly generate an array of objects. More often than not, I don't end up using those. A lot of times I'll end up creating my own custom objects, and that's just because it allows me to clearly see from this server script without having to log it out to console. You know, I can come in here and I can quickly see exactly what the structure of this object is supposed to be. And again, I know different folks have different preferences when it comes to these sorts of things. For me, this is just how I like to do it. So now, normally at this point, you know, this object here is ultimately going to become our view model. So, you know, a lot of folks will turn around and set this up so that it's the names, the property names reflect the underlying data model names. I actually try to push myself to go in a different direction. So for example, let's say, in fact, let's go ahead and, let's shift over here real quick. I'm going to jump into my iPad here and sketch up a couple things real quick. So ultimately what I am hoping to accomplish is to have a panel, and what I want to show is a, let's say a title, and then maybe a narrative box. And then we'll show off to the side down in the corner here some metadata. So let's go with that basic construct. We'll flip back to the main screen. So let's go with that basic concept. So we'll have a title. We'll have a short description, and we'll have a meta list. And for now, I'll hard code this list and we'll see how things go. All right, so for the title, and let me go ahead and switch back to single quote just for consistency, and because I usually end up using single quote anyway. I don't even know why I did double quotes this time. Again, this is the fun thing about going live, is that all this stuff that usually gets edited out of my videos, all of the, oh wait, I don't like this, oh wait, I don't like that, oh wait, what about this, oh wait, what, all that goes away and I can't protect myself anymore. I just have to wing it. All right, so let's go with get value. I think this is how we do it. One of the two there's the element where you turn around and do like gr.name.getValue, and then there's this approach, and I can't remember which one works in scoped applications. I'm always having to go back and figure out which one it is. I think it's this one that works. So we're going to get the number field, and actually we'll go, I am all over the place. Yeah, title, value, display value, Get display value. Number. All right, now we're starting to get somewhere here. Okay, and then short description, we'll do and then meta. Meta will need a couple things. Meta, we're going to need field name. We're going to need value and display value. So actually, I can basically just paste. There we go. Okay, so for the meta, let's go with assigned to. I am explicitly avoiding a date time field so that I don't have to deal with that right now. Maybe we can go back and add that later. Okay, GR.get. Get label. I think that's the one I want. Assigned to. All right, let's go with that and see how this goes. So next up, I need to return this out to a data to a data object. So we'll go with data.items is equal to get list items. And this is another thing that I like to do in my widgets is I like to separate out. First, I do like to separate out into functions, makes it nice and easy to collapse. Second of all, I like to put my inputs up top and my outputs down at the bottom. I've seen a number of scripts where you get a bunch of data dots all strewn throughout, and it's very challenging to see what the interface of your server script is, what's coming in, what's going out. So I like to actually separate out the inputs at the top and the outputs at the bottom and use simple variables in the middle in order to encapsulate all of the different behaviors, or just use functions to encapsulate the behaviors and use the returns, which reminds me, return items. That would have been bad to miss that. All right, so save it. Nothing should happen. Oh, look, read operation. Fun with scoped applications. Okay, so next up, let's do, not there, let's do it down here on the LI. We're going to do ng repeat to iterate through our c.data.items. And of course, we need item in. All right, so that's going to iterate for each item in c.data.items. And for those who are a little bit newer to Service Portal, data.items in your server script gets passed into your client controller as c.data.items. Well, technically it's this.data.items, which is AngularJS's controller as behaviors. But since we're assigning C the value or the reference of this, I think that's the right lingo. Since I'm assigning it this reference, I have c.data.items over here. Okay, so next up, we need to get our display right. So let's do a div. And we're going to show item.title.display value. And then we'll show div2 is going to be short description. And then the last div is going to be our meta. And this starts to show some of the advantages of using a separate language for your view model from your raw underlying data model. Because now at this point, I can easily adapt this, this glide record script to open it up a little bit more. You know, I could switch from incident table to request table. I could switch from request to catalog item. I could switch from catalog item to knowledge base, and this widget would still work regardless. So that allows me to more easily pull stuff out into instance options, into configuration data, while still leveraging the same exact language in my view model and therefore in my HTML template over here. So with that, let's save and see what happens. Fingers crossed. No, something broke. You got a question, Munchkin? No? My oldest was thinking of joining the live stream, but he backed out. Let's see. What did I do wrong? Wait. 400 bad requests? Something about guided tours. I don't know what happened there. Did it just take a while to load? Because I got it now. All right. I guess we're okay now. I guess we're okay. Okay. So let's try that again. So you'll notice that there's no, the skeleton portion never shows up. It doesn't show up at all. And that's because we are, well, first of all, it's set to false. So we're never actually loading. So next up, what I want to do is let's actually come in here and use, and let's go back to our docs page. Developer, there we go. All right, so I'm going to check out the APIs here. I don't know if this one's in here. I'm looking for the server.update. Update state object on the server within a given scope. This method is similar to server.update, but includes a $ scope parameter. No example. That's okay. All right, so anybody want to place bets on whether or not Nathan Firth is the first one on the list? Let's see. C.server.update, then, okay, so that's kind of what we're looking for, is this right here. So the C.server.update is going to allow us to, from our client script, wherever that went, here we go. From our client script, it's going to allow us to, and actually let's put this one in a function as well. Load list items. All right, so what we've got here is we're going to do c.server.update. Then, okay, so what's going to happen is when we call c.server.update, it's going to go back to the server, and it's going to rerun our server script. Now, there's two different variations of this function. Now that I think about it. Darn, I was hoping it would autocomplete and give me some intel. One of these functions allows you to pass an input variable back. The other, if I remember correctly, passes the data object back to the input. Either way, the difference between the initial run on the server script and a c.server.update or a c.server.get is that the initial run has input set to undefined. Any subsequent call is going to include an input variable of some kind. I want to say that c.server.update passes the data object back. And then, so that's an asynchronous call. So once the server finishes running the script and returning the data back, it's going to pass that data back into the function that we provide to the then call. And for those interested in more, you can look up promises, venables. They go by a couple different names. But basically, it's just a way to pass a callback function in a cleaner way than the usual callback hell that you end up in. So if I remember correctly, I believe it passes back a response object. And let's see. Let's just go now. Let's behave ourselves. Go with a console log because I honestly don't remember. All right, oops, and I forgot. Functions must be called. And again, putting everything in a function, it provides for a much cleaner code. I would much rather collapse all my functions and see the final logic down at the end. I would rather have a setup that provides scaffolding followed by execution rather than try to read a bunch of spaghetti code. So I try to put as much structure into my code as possible. All right, let's see what we get. Inspect element, console. Here's our object. Oh. Well, that's a pleasant surprise. So I probably use, I guess I use c.server.get more often, because in fact it looks like it passes it back, or you know what? It's entirely possible. It is entirely possible that c.server.update automatically assigns our c.data to the response object. Now, in c.server.get, you actually have to execute this function and do something with the data to assign it back. But I am thinking that maybe with the c.server.update, it automatically handles that binding, which sounds familiar. It's been a little while. So we're actually going to cap that off there, and we're going to experiment with something. So going back to the input, this is where I can turn around and specify if input, do this. So what this is going to do is it's going to take the loading data.items. It's going to take loading data.items and it's going to pull it out of the initial script run. So now when it initially runs the script, this function won't even be called. That allows this entire widget to skip the initial data load. It skips the entire query and the performance hit associated with that query, and just allows that widget to render the skeleton first. Of course, that's assuming this is set to true. And then the last bit here, I'll actually add this back because we do need one last piece, and that is once our c.server.update occurs, we need to set c.isLoading to false because we're no longer loading the data. Let's see what happens. Close, but no cigar. If you paid attention to the preview over here, watch again, I'm going to save, and you're going to see that quick blip of a skeleton that pops up. Let's see. So let's go ahead and say c.data is equal to data. Maybe. I don't know if my code broke or if it's still loading. I don't know what happened at all. What am I missing? What am I missing? Nothing, apparently. Okay, let's try that again with the c.data. Oops. Let's see how this goes. And console, data, nothing. Input, data.items, get list items. All right, so working theory. If you remember what I said a moment ago, one of these functions, get or update, passes the has to pass an input object. I don't see it in here, but possibly this is the one that has to pass an input. So we're just going to pass an empty object. Nothing. So let's try this. So one of the cool things in Service Portal, and I forget who taught this to me, but it blew my mind when I learned it. You can actually put console.log statements in your server script, and it will pass that information to the client side and actually log those statements out. So yay, input. Nothing. No input. Johnny 5 would not be pleased. What am I missing? All right, let's see if we can find some other documentation. I am looking for it. I'm looking for it. Not using anything from input there. Data.items. You know what? I'm going to switch for a second to c.server.get because I'm not quite sure what I'm doing wrong. I don't want to be overly hung up on this. Yeah, I am not sure what the issue I'm running into here is. C.server.get, new inputs. Then, okay, so if I jump back to my script here, c.data, c.server.get, data, then see the data object I'm getting back here is still empty. We're still not hitting the input, and I don't know why. Let's see. If I send a test object, okay, we've got input that time, but not when I passed c.data. That's kind of wild. So if you see, when I'm using the c.data as my input object, it's not hitting the if input. I don't remember this being the case in previous versions. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if maybe I've just never actually done it this way before. But when I use a blank object, it comes back just fine. And I get my data coming back. What about when I hit update? Does it do the same thing? No. Update still gives me trash. Yeah, I'm really not 100% sure what's going on with that, what exactly I'm doing wrong. I'll have to check it on some other versions and check it against some other code. But to keep us moving along here, what I want to do is, keep us moving. I've managed to get it working with the get function. So the get function is actually sending back a response object, and we want to set c.data to response.data. And so this should get us there. Negative. Data is not defined. Well, that's unfortunate. Oh. The danger of logging. There we go. Okay, now we're in business. All right, so let's go ahead and strip out the logging. That was just for debug purposes. We don't actually need it. So we're going to save it. And what you're going to see is you'll see this initial list load first, very quickly. And then you'll see these incidents load after. So we'll save it. And boom, and it's very, very quick. It's barely noticeable. Now, the thing here is that when you're adding multiple lists, each of these queries stacks on top of one another, and the live pressure. Yeah, thanks, Josh. No pressure at all. So it's very, very quick with a single widget. But if I jump over to some of our standard service portal pages, and I'm going to pull this URL, and we'll jump over, SP. So if I pull up our baseline service portal, some of these widgets, like my open incidents, we could potentially load after the initial page has loaded. This is especially the case when we move to top-rated, like a knowledge article, for example. You notice that there's a bit of a load there. We've got to load our knowledge article, then we have to load our sidebar data. By using some of the skeleton loading, we can offload the unnecessary data load, the secondary data, the sidebars. We can offload that after the primary data has already been loaded and rendered into the browser, giving the user a better experience overall, and really speeding up those load times. Now, this can also work if your main content is slow to load. So instead of getting the little ... ellipsis up here, they can get an initial hit showing, oh, here's, something's happening, something's loading. You do want to test your user base with this, though, because I have seen a couple of studies out there with skeleton loading where it actually created a negative perception in some cases when loading the primary data as compared to how Service Portal works, where it's got the ... And there's a number of running theories on why that's the case, on why the skeleton loading does really well in some cases and really poorly in others in terms of improving the perceived load time. But it is one of those studies that has gone around, and nobody's really pinpointed it down yet, at least not to my satisfaction anyway. I haven't been satisfied with the answers given yet, and I think some study is still needed. And of course, your organization can vary because user groups vary. If your user groups are, if you're in a startup that's, primarily under 35 crowd, that's going to be different from larger scale enterprise with a more diverse group of folks. So, you may want to run some samples, some A/B type testing to determine which one's going to work the best. Now, I was really hoping to get to the point tonight where I could actually move past these list group items and actually put the skeleton itself in place. But I got to go cook dinner because folks around here got to eat. So I am going to wrap up the live stream for tonight, and the next time we dive in, I'm going to pick up where we left off, and I'm going to try and get the skeleton, the actual skeleton put in place and start throwing some CSS styles in to hopefully really improve the overall user experience. So yeah, appreciate you guys joining in, and hope to see you next time. Let me know what you think.